All right, welcome to today's edition of Post-Gazette Live. I am Paul Zeise. We are here every day, pretty much at 5, or at least we try to be here every single day at 5 to talk about all of the things that go on in sports, particularly in Pittsburgh sports. We've got a lot to talk about with respect to the Steelers. A number of things have happened over the course of the past few days. Of course, it sounds like there's at least one staff change that's coming. I'm not sure it's going to be the one that's going to get everybody all that excited, to be honest. But at the end of the day, there has been at least one that we know of. And so now we just need to see if that's going to be the only one. And believe me, if it's the only one, then I don't really know what we're even talking about in terms of trying to get better or trying to do things differently, because this would be the ultimate in terms of, well, let's just run it back. So that's number one. Just real quickly, let's just wrap up a little bit. We're going to talk about T.J. Watt and company, but wrap up a little bit about this weekend and all of the football games we saw. First things first, one of the things that I saw this weekend watching these games is that, the Steelers are not close to a lot of these teams. They just aren't. I know that that's, something that is, there's this idea that because they make the playoffs every single year and all this other stuff that, they make the playoffs, so therefore they must be close. They're not close. They really are not close. I mean, the divisional round, to me, the wild card round is basically where you separate the men from the boys, right? It's kind of where you basically say, okay, these are the teams that got into the playoffs, but they really aren't that good. They aren't really that close to being contenders. But look at the last 4 teams that are standing in the AFC. I texted a buddy of mine during the Texans game the other day, and I said this. I was one of the people that believed that the Steelers could go to Houston and win. That would be their best path. They could go down and beat they could go down there and they could beat the Texans because the Texans aren't that good and all that other good stuff. Watching the Texans play their 2 playoff games, they're much better than the Steelers. They just are. I think they're better coached than the Steelers. I think that their offense is more creative than the Steelers. I think they've got a quarterback that's 10 times better than the Steelers. I think their defense is better than the Steelers. Steelers went to Houston and won. And that was looked at as like the most vulnerable team that they could possibly have played in that first round. They were not going to win. They weren't beating that team. And I got news for you. When they get Tank Dell back and they get Stephon Diggs back and they get a couple of extra, a couple more players added in the offseason and, through the draft and whatever, they're going to be better than the Steelers next year too. The Bills and the Ravens are, both clearly better than the Steelers. And the Chiefs, for whatever we want to say about the Chiefs are better than the Steelers too by a lot. Those teams all play a game that the Steelers don't play. In fact, I'm watching the playoffs. I honestly think the only team the Steelers might have beaten was the Broncos. That's it. I don't even think the Chargers, because the bottom line is the Chargers played the Texans, and the Texans' defense is much better than the Steelers, and they made a number of mistakes, and Justin Herbert threw some interceptions and all that stuff. I don't know that he would have done that against the Steelers because the Steelers' defense isn't anywhere close to as good as the Texans' defense. At least not by the end of the year. So, that's one of my first impressions. Secondly, all of the crying and whining about the Chiefs. Look, it's almost like heavyweight boxing or, championship boxing of any kind. If you're the champ, if you're the best team, the defending champ, if you're the team that's won 2 or 3, they've won 3 Super Bowls in 5 years, and you're clearly the number one team right now, and all that stuff, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt from the referees. If you want to beat them, you got to knock them out. Think of it in terms of boxing. So I don't think the referees are cheating for the Chiefs. And quite frankly, there was a lot of whining and crying about a couple of calls, really. That's what we're talking about. The first roughing the passer call against Patrick Mahomes was not a terrible call. Was it a little ticky-tack? Maybe, but there was clearly enough there that it's probably going to get called more than it's not against any quarterback. The second one, you know what, where he slid, the bottom line is the letter of the law there is if you give yourself up and you're the quarterback, they've got to lay up. Now, they did lay up, and they hit each other, and it's clear referees probably looked at it in real time and thought, well, they hit him. But we can talk. I mean, that's okay. Let's give them that call. I get it. I mean, this is really what we're talking about. You know, there's just one of these things that I just get tired of all of the excuse making and crying and whining when a team is winning like that. The Chiefs, clearly, they had like one or two calls go their way. But here's the thing I always say to people, and I challenge people this all the time. Like when, you know, during the Steelers games when I do my live chat, and everybody's complaining about a call here, a call there, or a missed hold there, or this. I said, let me ask you a question. Let me say this. If you're going to do that, you need to do it every single play, no matter who the missed call is against. Because we never, you know, I never look on my timeline and see all these guys, you know, with cut-ups of the opposing team getting held and not being called, or the opposing team, you know, jumping offside and it not being called, or the opposing team. I never see that. And it's the same thing with the Chiefs. I guarantee if you sat there and watched the game and looked at all of the plays with respect to the Texans, guess what? You probably would have said to yourself, boy, there's some missed calls that went in favor of the Texans as well. Because I don't believe that referees are trying to help one team or another. I just think that referees miss calls from time to time. And we've talked about the gambling aspect of it, but there's one other extra layer here as well. And the extra layer here is that the gambling aspect has caused us to all watch these games like really, really close, and with a probably not a very objective eye. And the other part of it is that they've, you know, it's forced us sort of to do is there's a lot of people that are rooting against the Chiefs. They hate the Chiefs. They're tired of the Chiefs. They've got Chief fatigue. It's almost like what the Patriots, right? It's just people got sick of the Patriots, and no matter what the Patriots did, it was scrutinized and over-scrutinized and everything else. It's the same thing going on with the Chiefs. People are watching the Chiefs, and they're basically saying to themselves, "Oh well, you know, that was the referees cheating in their favor," because again, you've got a heightened sense of every single thing that's going on because a lot of people are rooting hard against the Chiefs. It's kind of funny to me, but whatever. Now, you don't get the 7 straight AFC championship games because referees are helping you out. You know what the Chiefs don't do? Here's a couple things the Chiefs. First of all, they've got the best quarterback on the planet. I mean, I know last night the MVP versus MVP. The MVP played Saturday afternoon, and his name's Patrick Mahomes. In every single year, he's the MVP. He doesn't make mistakes. In the playoffs, he hardly ever makes mistakes, number one. Number two, when they need a play, he makes a play. Number three, and I think this is the most important thing, he's gotten so much better at managing games over the course of his career. You're against the machine when it comes to Patrick Mahomes. That's why I said everybody's playing for second in my mind in the AFC because you have to go to Kansas City and beat Pat Mahomes. I just don't see anyone doing it again this year. But the other part of it is the Chiefs as a whole don't beat themselves. They don't make stupid plays. They don't make they don't get dumb penalties. They don't get, showboat penalties and idiotic, roughing penalties way after the fact. They don't beat themselves. They hardly ever turn it over. They don't beat themselves. That's why they're good. That's why they win. They're the anti-Steelers in many ways because the Steelers traditionally in the playoffs, you know what they've done over the last 7 or 8 years? They beat themselves. They get dumb penalties. They turn the ball over. They have stupid play calls that put them behind the chains, right? They get celebration penalties. They get all this other nonsense. They play a stupid brand of football. So on top of being not as good as the Chiefs, they're not as smart as the Chiefs. So they'll never, ever beat the Chiefs unless they change some things about their philosophy and what they do and how they do it. So to me, I mean, that's what I saw. Now, last night, it's funny. You know the difference between the game, between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson last night? One guy made mistakes, the other guy didn't. I mean, we can point to the Mark Andrews play at the end of the game, and that's great, but the bottom line is they're not trailing by 11 or 10 or whatever if one guy doesn't make two mistakes in the first half. Now, I know that, we're not supposed to say that. I know that there's this idea that somehow, people are unfairly critical of Lamar Jackson, but guess what? Every quarterback that has been, pushed up as like one of the greatest or the elite or whatever, guess what? If they don't get through in the playoffs, at the end of the day, they're going to get criticized. And there's, probably a little bit of a trickle down as well as John Harbaugh. But it's funny, like Steeler fans are trying to say, well, you see, John Harbaugh, he can't win in the playoffs either, except for the fact that John Harbaugh has 3 playoff wins in the last, 4 years? I think he's got 3 playoff wins in the last 4 years, which is as many as Mike Tomlin has since 2000. So let's put that in perspective. If I'm the Ravens, I'd probably run it back one more time with John Harbaugh, but he's got to get it done next year. They've got to get it done. I know that, they've been close or whatever, but he's got a great quarterback. He's got, pretty much everything you need. He's got 9 Pro Bowlers on that team. He's got all pro players. He's got, they've got to get it done next year. You can basically say, well, it wasn't his fault that they turned the ball over or this or that. But the reality is, if you're the coach, it is the coach. You're the coach, and you basically have to take it on the chin. And I think that's where he's at. John Harbaugh, I think, is a good coach. I think he's done a pretty good job. But you know what? He's become Mike Tomlin of about 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. You got a Hall of Fame quarterback, an MVP candidate, a guy who's that good at quarterback, better win once or twice. And that's where he's at. You can say that's not fair, but I'll tell you this much right now. If I was a coach, I'd much rather have an elite Hall of Fame quarterback and the pressure to win than not. So to me, I think that's where we're at with John Harbaugh. The other games were all kind of interesting to me in some ways. I mean, Jaden Daniels, everybody's pointing to Jaden Daniels, and boy, has he changed, the Redskins or whatever and made them this team that is really one of the best teams in the league. Absolutely. But here's the thing. This is what you have to ask yourself. If the Steelers, as constituted, if they had drafted Jaden Daniels, would he have been as good this year as he was with Washington? I have asked the same question if the Steelers had drafted Lamar Jackson. And my answer is probably not. Because I think one of the things that is very much a part of the Jaden Daniels story is that they hired an innovative offensive coordinator who was willing to build an offense around his talents and let him do what he does best. That's really a big part of the story as well. So he could have come here and say he got drafted here. I think if you have Arthur Smith and company trying to run, with the head coach's real conservative philosophy, I don't know that he'd have been as good as he was. So to me, he's an exciting player. He's moving on. They're going into Philadelphia. But here's the other guy everyone talked about the 2 quarterbacks as the MVPs. How can anybody watch the Eagles and not understand how incredibly important and valuable Saquon Barkley is to that team? I mean, truth be told, I don't even think Jalen Hurts is that good. I don't. I think he's pretty good at running the offense. I think he's pretty good at running the football. I think he's really good at handing the ball to Saquon Barkley. And that might be the best thing he does. Seriously. And that's no rip on him. But, boy, I would tell you, that guy is unbelievable. And he carried the Eagles. And, next week they play the Commanders or whatever, and we'll see what happens. But I think, honestly, and I said this yesterday, and I guess it triggered somebody who, some non-important idiot on Twitter who reacted to it. But I said it I think the Eagles actually win in spite of Nick Sirianni because they are one of the dumbest teams I've ever watched. But that tells you how talented they are. It tells you how good their defense is. It tells you how good their offensive line is. It tells you how good Saquon Barkley is that they're able to overcome Nick Sirianni's and his staff's dumb decisions. I mean, that game shouldn't have even been close yesterday, but someone got the genius idea to drop back into the end zone and take a safety, of course. They had 5 or 6 sacks that didn't need to be because they should have been running the football. I mean, just one bad, dumb play after another. The next thing you know, you're hanging on for dear life. In a game that you had won, you're hanging on for dear life, to try and save yourself from a heartbreaking loss. So at the end of the day, again, I thought it was an enjoyable weekend of football. But my number one, the number one thing I took away from the whole weekend was it is going to be the fact that I just don't think the Steelers are really all that close to I just don't think they're all that close to all these other teams. And so, I feel like when you look at it, they have a chance. In many ways, they have a chance to do some things. Now, they have a chance, but they've got to have a good offseason. One of the things I will tell you that's pretty funny is, I think there are a number of people who really don't want to hear this, but if I were thinking about how you change the Steelers, especially now when we're not going to talk about having a meaningful coaching change, which, by the way, I think it's kind of hilarious, but if you think about it, the guy that looks like is going to be the first change on the coaching staff is Carl Dunbar, the defensive line coach. I don't know. It's almost like, if you think about it, if he's the only change they make, what are you doing? What is happening? That's what I would like to know. Like, there are a number of areas where I think that they could get better. But Dunbar has been, the defensive line coach. He's been with the Steelers for 7 years. He's a former player for the Steelers. But when you look at the Steelers and you say, okay, we need to make a change to the coaching staff. We need to, do this to get better. We need to make sure that we do that to get better. All that stuff. Okay. Here's my question to you. And I mean this. Is the defensive line the area that you felt like they needed to get better? Is the defensive line sort of the area where you think that, boy, they were a poorly coached team? Because I didn't think that was the area. I just feel like it's one of those situations where, honestly, we have to really, really take a hard look at what the Steelers are actually going to be ready to do. That's what I would like to know. What are the Steelers really going to be ready to do? And with that as sort of the backdrop, one of the things I suggested last week, and I'll accept, I'll do it again, is how about being willing to trade T.J. Watt? Now, I know there's a lot of people that get all worked up anytime you talk about moving on from a superstar. But my thing with that is, I look at T.J. Watt and I think he's in the last year of his deal. Okay? He's in the last year of his deal. And because he's in the last year of his deal, you're probably not going to get nearly as much as you want, but you're going to have to do something, because there are some people that think you probably should try and sign him for, more than, for another 3 or 4 years. I'll be honest with you. If you're signing him for another 3 or 4 years, you're kidding yourself for another 3 or 4 years because he's not going to give you what you need. I just think that is the important thing that you have to note. He's not going to give you 3 or 4 more years. What we've seen from him actually that has really kind of become a trend is that by the end of each of these years, he is worn out, beat up, beat down. He is. And honestly, I just don't know, if having him for what he's been throughout the regular season, it is one of those things where, you know what, maybe you can get something for him, some draft picks. Now, I don't think you're going to get then I've heard people say, well, you should trade him for 2 firsts and 2 seconds. Believe me, if somebody called the Steelers tomorrow and said, we'll give you 2 firsts and 2 seconds for T.J. Watt, and they said no, then all of them should be fired. But it probably is realistic to get a first and maybe a third or something like that. I would trade him. I would trade Minkah Fitzpatrick. I don't know what you're going to get for him because of his contract, but to me, you're not going to make anything happen with this team unless you're willing to be bold in the offseason. I get it. Dan Rooney, Chuck Noll, back in the day, they basically did everything the way where they, everything was conservative and everything was stable and stability and all that other good stuff. I get all that. But if you want to really change the course of this team, you have to make sure that you're bold this offseason. We've already seen that they're going to move on from Russell Wilson. That's the right decision. To me, you put Justin Fields as one of your quarterbacks and you go find another quarterback. I don't know who that would be. Maybe you draft one. But the reality is, if you're going to commit to Justin Fields, then the first thing you have to do is commit to making the offense around him and the offensive philosophy such that he has a chance to succeed. And again, that goes back to my discussion about the Commanders. Watching them these last 4 or 5 weeks, I'm going to tell you, the biggest thing about them is they know what to do with Jaden Daniels. They know how to use him. They know how to use his talents. And here's the thing that's really frustrating. Lamar Jackson, $250 million plus, contract quarterback. Josh Allen, $200 whatever million contract. Jalen Hurts, I think he's one of the $250 million club too as well, right? Jaden Daniels, first-round pick, obviously a quote-unquote franchise quarterback. You know what they all do? They all run the football. They all run read option plays. They all run the football. There's no fear of them getting hurt, which is what the Steelers' company line was the first 5 or 6 weeks with Justin Fields, which is why they sort of just ran a very conservative offense with him that wasn't all that creative, wasn't all that imaginative, didn't utilize the thing he probably does best, which is run. He's a bigger, more athletic quarterback than a lot of these guys. I think he can take a little bit of a pounding. But the more important thing is if you're smart, all those guys have shown if you're smart, you go down, you slide, you get out of bounds, you do those kinds of things. You minimize the number of hits. You can preserve yourself as a runner. But again, it doesn't matter if the Steelers aren't going to change their philosophy. It doesn't matter. Their philosophy is way too conservative for a guy like Justin Fields to really be that kind of guy. And, again, I get it. It worked. Hey, it worked for Dan Rooney and Chuck Noll. But this isn't the 70s anymore. This isn't the 80s anymore. It's a different era of football. And the Steelers are still stuck in an era that doesn't exist anymore. And thankfully, the number of fans who are still stuck in that era seems to be less and less every week as people start to look around and watch these other teams play. And they say to themselves, boy, if you watch these other teams play, seems like they're doing things a lot different than the Steelers. Well, that's because they are. I just think that's really the reality of it, is that they are doing things different than the Steelers. As an aside, people ask me, who are you rooting for in the playoffs? we're all rooting for the Bills, right? If you want a new team to win it, it's got to be the Bills. Chiefs have won it before. You know, the Commanders, Redskins have won it before. The Eagles have won it before. It's got to be the Bills. That's who you're rooting for, right? Anyway, look, I did this just for you. I did this all just for you right here. It's got to be the Bills. We're all in Bills Nation nowadays, right? But anyway, I just threw that in there. But back to the Steelers. You have to be in a situation where you are bold. And the first move, I think that's bold, is, okay, who of the superstars are we going to trade? And, you know, if you look at what T.J. Watt's done the last couple of years, do you know what's been a trend? More than a trend? By the end of the year, he's beat up. By the end of the year, he's a lot less effective. By the end of the year, he's not making nearly as many plays. So, you know, again, I think he's a great, great player. The Steelers have to do one of two things with him next year. Either one, put him on a pitch count. Number one, put him on a pitch count. Let Gerwig and Alex Highsmith take as many of the snaps as they can early in the season, and you use T.J. Watt sparingly, and you know what? You tell him, listen, we don't want you getting beat up and don't want you getting worn down. You know, I mean, we laugh at the NBA because it's soft and all that other stuff with load management. But if you're going to have T.J. Watt next year and you want him to be effective in the playoffs, you're almost going to have to adopt an NBA mentality with him, which is in the first and second quarters of some of these games, give him, you know, a few more plays off than he's used to getting. In some of these games that are decided or that you're way up, get him out of the game. Preserve as many plays for him for late in the season as you possibly can. And again, I hate the NBA load management crap. I hate that they're that soft that they need to take nights off and all that other stuff. But in TJ Watt's case, he plays so hard and so violently, and his body breaks down as a result of it. There's people say, well, you know, look, he doesn't miss many games. Yeah, he plays, but he plays at less than 100%. And you know what? At his age, less than 100%, he's not great anymore. So I think that's something that they can look into doing. The other one is Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's a luxury item, as I've said many times. Make some trades that way. But if you look at all of these teams that are still playing, they're almost all teams that are still playing because they were willing to invest in their offense. And you can say the Chiefs, well, the Chiefs have been a great defensive team and all that other stuff. Yeah, exactly. But you know what? They have $400 million or whatever it is tied up in their quarterback. Their tight end makes a lot of money as well. And some of the guys on their line make a lot of money. But the reality is the teams that are still playing, are playing in large part because of their offense and their ability to score. I mean, the Eagles are, they're not a high-flying, passing offense, but guess what? With that offensive line and Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, they can run all over people. And they're trying to score a ton of points. They're not a 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of thing. They really believe that their offense, they really believe their running game can go 75, 80 yards on any play. Period. And they've got a good deal. Look, all these teams have good defenses, but honestly, they're winning because their offenses don't make mistakes and don't turn the ball over, but also because their offense can make explosive plays. I mean, even the Ravens, yesterday, which we can talk about. I get ripped on social media because I am the biggest advocate of you don't go for 2 until you absolutely have to. I know that's changed because we've got all these young guns and all these analytics guys, right? But my thoughts when they got pulled to within 21-19 is if I were coaching, I would kick the extra point here. And guess what? They didn't get the 2, so now guess what happens? You have to chase the 2 at the end of the game. Mark Andrews play, the Mark Andrews play never happens, okay, if they kick the extra point early. Of course, you might say, well, Harbaugh would have went for 2 anyway. He might have. But at least at that point, it's you're going for 2 because you want to try and just win the game right there, not because you're chasing points. And so, of course, there was a minute 33 left. And this is what a lot of people aren't talking about this Ravens game yet, but there's a minute 33 left in the game when Mark Andrews dropped a 2-point conversion. The Bills had 2 timeouts, a minute 33, and they had a kicker that just blasted one through from 52 yards right down the middle, the last possession before that. So I don't know that just because Mark Andrews dropped the ball that the Ravens would have won even if he caught it. In fact, I'm likely to say that the Bills would have went right down the field and kicked the field goal to win. Just kind of, but even the Ravens, though, they were down a bunch early, at halftime. They came right back and they were able to get into the position to tie the game because their offense is good, because they can make explosive plays. And I think that's the thing the Steelers have to develop next year. If they're going to come back with this same crap philosophy, it's going to be a long year. But if they're going to try and become dynamic on offense, which means you might have to shed a little bit of your defense. And quite frankly, again, they spend so much money on their defense isn't good. So if you change, a couple of guys and take a few of the stars off that side of the ball and put the money on the other side of the ball, you're in pretty good shape, I think. I mean, seriously, that's the way it goes. So I really think that, this is an off season where they have to really rethink all of the philosophical things that they hold dear, because I think it's not in a position where they are getting to, they can compete with these teams, in the playoffs, period. I just don't think that's the case. And you know what? If the only move you're going to make in the offseason is get rid of Russell Wilson, and apparently you're getting rid of Carl Dunbar, your defensive line coach, if that's what we're talking about, I don't know what we're going to do, honestly, next year that's going to get it, that's going to get anybody excited about this team. Maybe Justin Fields is your quarterback. You commit to, hey, we're going to build an offense that is dynamic around his talents. Okay, I'll listen to that. And I'll be willing to watch it. But it's got to start with a change in philosophy. And it's also got to start with the ability of trying to be bold with all of the moves that you make. All of the moves that you make, trying to understand that if you just sort of sit around and hope it gets better, it's not going to get better. Period. Real quickly tonight, it's interesting. Most people have probably forgot about this because it just is the dumbest thing ever, how long this season continues to just drag out. But tonight you've got Ohio State playing against Notre Dame in the championship game. My first thoughts are, why is the championship game, what is this, November 20th or 21st? Or what the hell is the date now? Let me look. It is November. I don't even know the 20th. November 20th. January 20th. And we're still playing college football. I just don't understand why the powers that be think this is good. The ratings for the semifinals were not great, mostly because I don't think most people knew when they were actually being played. I feel like a lot of people don't even remember. I know, VA, I know. It's January, sorry. But most people don't even think about the fact that this game is being played today. There's not a lot of people talking about it because I think most people have forgotten we're still in the college football season. If they want to make it better, here's my quick synopsis on how to make it better. Number one, very simple. That week 0 thing where some teams playing everybody plays week 0, period. That's the last week of August or whatever it is. Secondly, nobody gets more than one open week. This thing where some teams have 2 buys or whatever, one open week. Number 3, you move your conference championship games 2 weeks earlier. So you're done with conference championship games 2 weeks earlier. And then you start the playoffs. You've got 3 rounds essentially, right? The round of 12, the round of the round of 12, There were 4 byes. Yeah, the round of 12. Then you got it down to the round of 4. Then you got the semifinals. So there's 4 rounds. Bottom line is, in order to get 4 rounds in, so that the championship game is either January 1st or January 8th. You want to tell me that we play the 2 semifinals on January 1st and then a week later they play the championship game? That's fine. But this nonsense where it's January 20th and we're still sitting here talking about college football. I can't even remember who's playing in the game, to be honest. Obviously, I know it's Ohio State, Notre Dame, but I had to actually be reminded about this the other day when we were talking. I was talking to somebody the other day. I was like, yeah, when is this game at? I forget when the game is. So I think that's really, the important thing is you're losing part of your audience because I think a lot of people check out on college football by now. And to me, forget about, all the arguing about seeding and who should have got in and who shouldn't have got in. The number one thing they need to do to fix this thing is fix the calendar. Fix it so that you play your conference championship game, basically the second week of November. The week after Thanksgiving is when you have your first playoff games. Your second playoff games are, the next Saturday. You want to tell me that you skip forward then for, the semifinals to January 1st? Fine. But it has to be something like that. Because at the end of the day, this is ridiculous that we're sitting here. I mean, the NFL is down to their Final Four. And we're talking about college football playing a game tonight. It's Ohio State, Notre Dame. Obviously, 2 big brands. I'm assuming there'll be a reasonable audience for it because a lot of people are interested in the game. But I'll be honest with you. If you're not a fan of those 2 teams and a big college football fan, I bet you most people have forgotten. Most people have forgotten that this game was going to be played tonight. That's the problem. It's not the seeding. It's not that, Alabama got left out or whatever. It's not that. None of that is the problem is the calendar at this point. And so you can fix the calendar, but you've got to be, again, we talk about being bold. You've got to be bold enough to say everybody starts their season week 0, and you got to have it done by mid-November. So you only get 1 bye or whatever. That's just me. As for who's going to win the game, I have no idea. I think Ohio State will win, but you know what? This Notre Dame team has the feel of a team that is basically sort of, and I hate using team of destiny, but they've played like a team that's got a chip on their shoulder. They've been a little bit doubted in their last few games. I'd probably still go with Ohio State, but it won't shock me if Notre Dame wins. Game's still on at Archie's, by the way. If you want to get down to Archie's, get down to Archie's. Tonight I'll be there to watch the game. This game we're talking about. Archie's, home of 80-cent wings, Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. They've got all the games all the time, so get down to Archie's on Carson Street. And when you get there, tell them that Paul Zeise sent you. Thank you so much for joining us again tonight. Today, we'll do it again tomorrow at 5 o'clock, same time, same channel, all of that good stuff. We'll do it like we do it. Hopefully we have more news about coaching than just, the defensive line coach is being, let go.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.